This picture, from the January 9th, 1970 edition of Life magazine, is of a crowded New York City subway train at the beginning of a decade. This image represents a segment of daily life in the United States during a time in which the country was beginning to get a little grittier, dirtier, and hard-edged after 2 decades of unparalleled economic growth and optimism about America's potential. By 1970, however, the United States was torn apart due to the Vietnam War, while its cities were experiencing a financial, physical, and psychological decline due to creeping unemployment, inflation, and economic stagnation. More factories were closing as manufacturing jobs were being shipped overseas for cheaper labor. Crime rates were soaring as the post-war baby boom was finding fewer opportunities in an increasingly declining economy. Urban racial unrest had been boiling over by 1970 as cities struggled to provide opportunities for all of its citizens instead of using its police force as an occupying army in so many neighborhoods. It's uncertain whether the photographer had in mind the events of the late 1960s when he or she took this photograph, but the tired faces of the man in the hat and the woman with the beehive hairdo looking at downward angles towards one another reflect how the country is becoming more weighted down. The man and woman probably don't know each other, but have been thrust together by the circumstances of a rush hour commute. They contrast with the two people in the lower right-hand window, sitting down with their backs to the camera, passing time by having a conversation. Whether they know each other, though, is no more clear than the previous discussed pair standing up. Everybody acts differently when thrown into a crowded space. My love of cities and the public transportation that drives city life forward, no matter if the times are good or bad, are why I chose this picture. I also love looking at the images of the 1970s, perhaps because I was born in 1972. I only have a child's memory of what the decade looked like. It's nice to look back on the decade I was born in to remind myself of the world that surrounded me when I was young. I grew up on the east side of St. Paul, near the corner of White Bear and Arlington Avenues. My dad moved us there primarily so that he would be near a bus line that could easily take him to his job at the post office in downtown St. Paul. Some of my first memories are of riding the bus with my dad to my downtown preschool. The first time I spent any time in New York City was in 2003 when I attended a class at Columbia University for a week. Columbia is way up in the north part of Manhattan, right next to Harlem. I arrived in New York a couple days before my class began so that I could explore the city. On my first full day in the city, I spent a lot of it either walking around on the sidewalks in New York's many neighborhoods or riding the subway, which began in 1904 and is now the world's largest. I rode the subway all the way down to the Lower East Side, walked across the Brooklyn Bridge to downtown Brooklyn, and then caught another subway out to Coney Island at the edge of Brooklyn, about a half-hour ride above ground, which allowed me to take in the huge expanse of New York City. The next day, I took another subway up into the Bronx to see a Yankees game, and the car was as packed with people going to see the game as people were in this Life magazine photo. I was so taken with the scene around me in the subway car that I missed the stop at Yankee Stadium and had to double back at the next stop. I got to the game on time, though. Nothing like public transportation.